and welcome. I grew up on a small farm in southeastern Pennsylvania, in the Pennsylvania Dutch country. And the farm was more of a gentleman's farm. We had raised about 40 sheep. We had hay and buckwheat and raised buckwheat and stuff like that. I was a farm boy. From about age 6, I was in charge of the sheep and dealing with all that stuff. And I worked in local dairy farms in the summer, that sort of thing. I am not a natural engineer by any stretch of the imagination. But when you're on a farm, you just learn how to fix things because things are breaking all the time. And while I've never had any formal training or any formal skill in mechanics, I'm okay at figuring things out. I can blow out a fuel line. I can service equipment pretty well. My two brothers are really kind of gifted mechanics and engineers and carpenters, and I pretty much fake it. Kind of go slow, pay attention to detail, but eventually I get things going. In the context of my family, I'm pretty helpless when it comes to making my way in the physical world. But in Tara's family, when it comes to fixing things that break, I'm like Oppenheimer. I feel really great about it. But I wanted to share a story about a time when I was managing a 1,000-acre farm, co-managing a 1,000-acre farm, and in charge of the animals out in the Midwest. And at one point, and the cool thing about this farm was we were all really deep into meditation. We were doing transcendental meditation at the time, so twice a day, 20 minutes a day. And I was working on a sickle bar mower. If you don't know what a sickle bar mower is, it has these hard tines and then these cutting blades that go underneath. And it's a pretty complicated piece of equipment because you've got the tines break and you got to replace them, and it's all driven by a belt. And I could not figure out how this belt drive worked. I got more and more frustrated. I actually kicked the tire. I was so angry because I couldn't figure it out. And I realized it was time for meditation. So I kind of walked away. I sat for 20 minutes just doing my mantra. I came back and I immediately saw what the problem was. And I fixed it in about 3 minutes. And there was something about that experience that really stood out for me. Something wasn't working. I stopped. I walked away. I forgot about it. I shifted my consciousness. I came back. I saw clearly. That's a little bit about what I'd like to talk about is the power of hitting the reset button in your life. I'd like to talk about remembering the result that you want in the first place in your life, in general, in a project, and all the things you're committed to do. Second, the power of the pause and really taking stock of where you are. And third, the power of stepping away. And then fourth, what can happen when you refresh your focus and your sense of what wants your attention now when you step away and you shift your attention and then return. So this time of year, I do this annual review. I've been doing it for many, many years. It's a grueling, kind of helpful process, but it's all part of my commitment to constant and never-ending improvement. I've always been like a life hacker type. I remember when I was in college, I was a composition major, English major. And I remember thinking, well, who are the best writers? How did they do it? Maybe there's something in their system that I can figure out. And so I was really struck by William Faulkner, for example, he'd do his writing in the morning, take a nap, have lunch, go for a walk, come back, and not recognize what he wrote. Just sort of channeled it. Milton was the same way. He was either writing this incredible poetry or he was whining about the muse that had left him. The voice that he just couldn't find. And I got some really good insights about it. there are these really cool systems you can learn from people who are doing what you want. But I also realized that no matter what your system is, there's such a thing as a gift. And I realized pretty early on, and it keeps getting reinforced in my life, that I am a good enough writer to know I'm not a great writer. I read some writers and I'm just in awe at the gift that they have. But nevertheless, we can really learn a lot about best practices. I've always been a productivity nut. I love reading about life hacks and optimizing flows and best practices. And when I read David Allen's book, Getting Things Done, like 10 years ago, it was like, oh, that's what I want. I want to get things done. So I've been using his system for a really, really long time. And I would imagine to some degree it's the same for you. The mind is naturally drawn to comparisons and judgment. There's a natural desire to kind of improve and get better. And that's a big part of the path, is this path of self-improvement. And there's something very noble about that. The desire to become a better communicator, be a better partner, be more efficient, get in shape, optimize your health. The process of improvement is really powerful, but that's just one path. That path doesn't necessarily lead to liberation, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. And of course, if you're on a path of self-improvement, or what some people call the path of means, the question is, what's the goal? What do you want? And if we don't answer that one, if we don't know what we want, we'll be going faster and faster, but maybe not getting anywhere. So since this is a Dharma class, it's really helpful to reflect on the Buddha's life. Well, what did the Buddha want in his life? And of course, as a quick recap, what he really wanted was freedom, to know what it means to move beyond sickness, old age, and death. And you may recall the kind of heavenly messengers, the awakenings he had as a young man when he saw someone sick, he saw someone old, he saw a dead body. And he realized and he was told that this happens to everyone. Then we saw a renunciate. He saw someone who had stepped back from the world to dedicate himself to awakening. And he was like, that's my path. And so he set off multiple practices, all kinds of explorations, but the guiding star for him was freedom. And so I think that's the guiding star for all of us, but we forget. And this remembering, it's like the path itself. I don't know about you, but my attention gets fractured. My attention gets split in 10,000 directions at the same time. And this remembering what's most important becomes really important. I've told this story multiple times, but it's helpful for me to hear it. So I'm going to share it again. When Tara and I took our wedding vows, we took that occasion to kind of build in the Bodhisattva vows. And the phrase that we chose was, may whatever arise serve the awakening of heart and mind and be of benefit to all beings. Those are really wonderful words, but I can't tell you how many times in our relationship when I was hurt or angry or blaming, when I remembered that, may whatever arise serve the awakening of heart and mind and be of benefit to all, I remember that's what I signed up for. That's what I really, really want. So knowing the end result out of anything is really important. And that remembering is the tip of the arrow. Intention is the tip of the arrow. So there's a lot we could dive into around knowing what that is, because it's about really drilling deep, deep, deep. What do you really, really, really want? In fact, Ramana Maharshi, one of the great sages of India, said that if you hang out in that question long enough, what do you really, really want? It will strip away all of your conditioning and take you to that sense of true nature. But to whatever degree you know what you want, it's incredibly helpful to take stock and ask yourself, so how am I doing? Is what I'm committed to this week aligned with where I want to be in the next 10 years? So I kind of formalized this annual review practice. There's an author by the name of James Clear. He wrote a book called Atomic Habits, which is a bestseller. And I read his annual review, and I thought, wow, that the honesty, the kind of the brutality he had around his own self-assessment, I could benefit from that. So I started doing it. I started sharing it, and other people found that helpful. So it's kind of kept me going. And it's been a very humiliating process because I line myself up. This is what I want to do in the following year. And inevitably, some stuff I would do, some stuff just would fall by the wayside. And rather than beating myself up, which I did for quite a while, I looked a little bit closer at, well, why didn't those things work? Sometimes I just didn't have enough information. I thought I wanted it, but it didn't. Sometimes something more, even more alive came along, and then it became kind of choiceless choice. I just have to do this other thing. But let me ask you, in a little reflection here, if you like, you can close your eyes. And if you think back over this last year, what 3 things would you say you worked? What are 3 things in this last year that you're grateful for, or that you're proud of? And when you pause here, it's helpful to kind of honor what worked, what you're grateful for. Let's take a few moments just to reflect, well, what didn't work? What are 3 things that are disappointments, that are maybe unexpected this last year, or things that you said you would do that you just didn't do? What 3 things didn't connect or didn't work for you? If you'd like, you can open your eyes or you can remain with them closed. For me, you can read mine. It's on my website. But I'll spare you all the details. But I came to realize that what worked for me was I live in a really happy home. I'm in a relationship I'm grateful for. I love where I live. I'm so grateful to be healthy. Part of it is genetics. Part of it is I really focus on being as optimally healthy as I can. My personal practice, my meditation practice feels rich. I feel really engaged and awakening in life. I'm so grateful for that. I'm pretty secure financially, which is wonderful. I put myself in that category of more than some and less than others, but it's definitely it's something I'm grateful for. I love what I do, bright livelihood. I'm so blessed to do what I do and to kind of serve in the way I do. I have creativity in my life, which is wonderful. I've been focusing on simplifying. I kind of made some strides in making my life more and more simple. And I also committed this last year to savor more in my life. Part of it is of just appreciating impermanence and aging, building in more time to savor what I have. This last summer, I remember saying to Tara, I want to have a summer. I've never had a summer. Farm boys, they work all summer. And I had a summer. It still worked, but there was something about a little more space that was so enjoyable. When I reflect on what worked, and I encourage you to maybe do some reflection, do some journaling. It just feels so good to realize how blessed we are and how many things are actually okay. But equally, it's helpful to really look closely at what didn't work. So a couple things for me that didn't work. With COVID, stepping back from all the public teaching and leading retreats and all that stuff, all the live stuff, I really made a commitment to just let it go and kind of hang out and kind of let the next big thing emerge. And the next big thing really hasn't emerged. Much of what I do best is kind of relational, deep inner work where there's cultivating a sense of intimacy, connection, safety, and really moving into deep questions. And I've discovered that that's just not great in an online format. There's just something about online and not being face-to-face that it's not as safe as it needs to be, in my estimation, for people. So taking away that thing that I've done really, really well and that I love has been kind of a challenge for me. I'm kind of working on that. I realized that every year I talk about doing more marketing, and I realized I just hate that stuff. And then, of course, the never-ending question: am I doing enough? Am I serving enough? Is there more I could do? Am I maximizing myself? That's always kind of a gnawing thing in the back of my mind. So, just as there's something powerful about naming what worked and the successes and making room for the good and looking at the good, there's something really powerful about exploring, what's between you and feeling good. Sometimes it's helpful to really turn toward what's not working. Just as there's this brilliant function of pain, pain is calling your attention towards something that needs healing. When you really reflect and investigate, what's not working, there can be some interesting things to learn down there. One model says first there's awareness of what's not working, and then there's sort of an adjustment and then an accommodation. For example, I've always beaten myself up for not doing more outreach, more marketing, or more self-promotion. I have such an allergy toward it. And I thought, okay, let me really, really look at this, because this keeps coming up. Should I be on Facebook more? Should I set up an Instagram account? Should I do more promotional stuff on social media, more short stuff on YouTube? And I really thought about it, and I got really still. I thought, God, so should I do more of this? And I just had this sense of, nah, I don't think so. And I'm finding peace with that, which is really nice. It's fine. I'll keep doing what I'm doing, and I don't want to add to the noise level out there. The competition of the spiritual marketplace is just something I do not want to participate in. So there's something here about really taking stock, about looking at the goals that you have and then the reality of where you are now in relationship to those goals. And this process of stepping back or stepping away is the difference between simply doing the same things that you've always done and the possibility of something different. Mindfulness is about non-judging awareness. It's about stepping back, about seeing what's there. And in many ways, it's kind of like zooming out and taking that 3,000-year view or the 100-year view of your life. This brain science that's happening in relationship to mindfulness and meditation is fascinating, because ultimately, just as the Buddha's intention was, one way to language it is that to see more clearly into the nature of reality. And I love that language, to see more clearly into the nature of reality. When you step back, when you cultivate mindfulness, what happens? Well, for many people, what happens is that tightly bound sense of me, the tightly bound sense of the I, begins to get kind of amorphous, tends to fall away. And so, as science is looking at the nature of reality, there's all this amazing research now about the quantum field, about the bending of time and space, about wormholes, how you can go into one dimension and pop up in another dimension. I love that phrase, the field of infinite possibility. How do we access that? How do you access the field of infinite possibility? How do you access that quantum field of presence? Well, the Buddha said, allegedly, what we need to remember is who you are without the sense of I or mine. When I and mine are not present, that's when the mystery begins to open up. And you know those moments when I and mine falls away. Quite often they're ecstatic moments. To some degree, when that sense of I and mine falls away, there's a sense of spaciousness, a greater sense of ease. A sense that we're part of something bigger than who we are. And entering into the field of infinite possibility, entering into the quantum field of pure consciousness, there can be no I and there can be no mine. We need to drop all identity to sense that. And I think sometimes that sense of who I am without I or mine is a place without a story. It's a place without fear. And you can say that there's a lot of training of the mind to touch into those places of no I and no mine, the quantum field. But there are also traditions that say, actually, it's easier than you could imagine. It's closer than you could imagine. It's already here. So maybe a short little meditation, just to kind of, maybe just a little taste of this. If you like, you might close your eyes. And you might slow down your breath. You just sense in your own way the possibility of this field of infinite possibility, the quantum field of presence, where there is no I and no mine. And you might just sense it, as many people do, as just sort of this background. It's the water that the fish swim in. It's the air that we breathe. And if you would, take in a nice, long, deep, slow inhalation and hold the breath. And if you like, just feel the outline of your body. Feel your skin, the air touching your skin. And then relax and soften. Taking a long, slow, deep inhalation. And if you like, hold the breath. And you might bring your attention to slightly above your head or even slightly behind your head. And just imagine or feel this realm of presence or soul. And then relax on the out-breath. And then once again, a slow, full, deep breath in. Just hold the breath very gently. Bring your attention slightly above, maybe slightly behind your head. Feel the outline of your body and sense this realm of presence or soul, the field. Gently let the breath soften. And take a moment to simply imagine or feel just this quality of presence, quality of soul, if you like. And you might just ask yourself, when you sense who you are as a product of your conditioning, the conditioning of your primary caretakers, your family system, the culture you grew up in, what wants to change? Or is there something you would like to change, something you would want to let go of? Is there some old programming or conditioning that's no longer working for you? And could you imagine who you might be without it? And you might, in your own time, gently deepen the breath. If you like, you can open the eyes. And that was just, of course, a little glimpse. I've been exploring in my own practice this sense of sensing that quality of pure presence, the quality that is not touched by eye or mind. And from that perspective, just sensing all the conditioning of just how much of my life is a product of conditioning, the condition itself. And I've been seeing more clearly into the nature of my own anxiety as of late. This early conditioning in my life that's kind of led me to a deep sense of distrust, kind of the push for something different. Eckhart Tolle talks of the pain body, which is this mechanism of self-protection that we take on without even knowing it. We each have our own specific wiring. And usually it's related to some early searing experiences that kind of calcify who we are. So we tighten up, we freeze up. And quite often, we each have our own unique strategy for survival that sometimes becomes your strategy for success. Sometimes the strategy shows up in some ways of like, I'm going to change what's wrong. We become a reformer in life. Or maybe I'm going to make sure everyone else feels good. I'm going to make sure everyone gets their needs met. Or maybe I'm going to be the most successful person wherever I go. Or maybe I'm going to make sure everyone knows I'm here. Or maybe I'm going to sit back and just figure out how all this works. Or maybe I'm going to make sure no one controls me. Or maybe I'm just going to have fun. I don't care what anyone thinks. Or maybe I'm going to be the one who organizes everyone else. I'm going to be that person. Or maybe I'm going to make sure everyone else around me is happy because then maybe I'll be happy. What I find so interesting is how the wound can become the gift. For example, you might be the kind of person who is a master at anticipating what people around you need before they even need it. Chances are that there might be a wound in there. And since no one really did that for you, you're going to make sure that happens for everyone else, and then that becomes your place in the world. And for me, as I've kind of come in contact with my own sense of like really kind of really early trauma, was a deep sense of distrust. And that sense of like deep distrust sort of engendered in me a desire to have other people feel they could trust their life. It's amazing how that works. So many people I know, the most interesting thing I find is like people who are highly intuitive, like really highly intuitive, quite often come from backgrounds that were really unstable because they learned really, really on how the car door slammed, whether they were going to get yelled at or beaten up that night. That sort of like sixth sense that comes from the wound actually can become the gift. So stepping back in your life is about first becoming aware of your story, and your history, and your conditioning. And then over time, it becomes about befriending and making room for that. And ultimately about letting go of the story and opening up again to that sense of possibility. I'm so aware of the mechanism of fear and anxiety in my life. And every now and then, when I sense that conditioning in my own life, I can ask myself, okay, so who am I without that conditioning? Who am I without that imprint of fear and anxiety? And it gives me a glimpse, just a glimpse of that, the field of infinite possibility, the quantum field. It's a scary place sometimes, but it can also be a sense of feeling the source, turning toward that. The deep sense of who you are beyond the conditioning. So it becomes a very interesting question, which shows up for meditation for me and for me sometimes is, so who am I without fear? Who am I without stress? And when I tune into that, and I'll offer a brief little meditation before we close, I can begin to sense what really enlivens me. In the absence of fear, I can begin to sense that creative impulse. And I find that so, so powerful because so much of our desires and so much of our intention in life is around trying to soothe our anxiety. And a very interesting thing I've noticed, and I think this is probably just a product of age, but it also may be coming from my meditation practice, is that drive that I felt in my life, that life-hacking, self-improvement thing. A lot of it has come from enthusiasm. And a lot of it has also come from fear. And what I really wanted in life was something that would make the fearful self kind of more content and more soothed. So of course it was about success. It was about fame. It was about pleasure. The 8 worldly wins. And just imagining that if I could just be successful and avoid failure, wouldn't that feel great? If I could focus on being liked and avoid being disliked, that's what I want. But if we don't become aware of those 8 worldly wins, if we don't kind of transcend the desire for more and the fear of less, then we're simply caught and trapped. And what I'm beginning to sense, maybe, is that it's more about immersing myself into that quantum field, if you will. It's more about moving beyond that sense of I and mine and resting deeply in that sense of presence. The more I do that, the more I will be informed. The more there's a possibility that my life will be touched and guided by something that is not based on fear and self-preservation, but more of a sense of, I just have to do this because it's coming from the inside out. So for me, with my annual review, it's more about designing my life so I can surrender more into that space, as imperfectly as I do it, and really deeply listening. There's a wonderful distinction between form and essence. The form is what it looks like from the outside. The essence is what it feels like on the inside. Quite often, we have a sense of what our life is supposed to look like. But what I'm trying to do is to tune in more to what it feels like on the inside. And to trust, the more I immerse myself into that, the more I'll be informed and guided in my own life. There are times in our lives when we're really called to doing and to action. And of course, that's so important. It's important in spiritual practice. But it's also important to exercise that muscle of surrender and being and resting in presence in that deep inner listening. And I think for me, we'll see if it turns out this way. Just when I walked away from that sickle bar mower, frustrated and angry, and I came back 20 minutes later, seeing clearly what I had to do, I imagine that my life will be more informed the more I immerse myself in that field of infinite possibility. And I hope for you too, in your life and in your practice, that you will be guided less from fear and more from that place of possibility inside you. So, if you like, let's have a short little meditation here. You can close your eyes. You might take 3 slow breaths. And notice if you could soften and relax just a little bit more. Could you relax the little muscles around your eyes? Could you soften the backs of your hands? Could you soften the soles of your feet and your heels? And in these final minutes, you might take a few moments and reflect on who you are as a product of conditioning, the influence of your primary caretakers, your family, your culture, your friends. And imagine, if just for a few moments, who you are unconditioned, just pure awake presence. Imagine if just for a moment, in the absence of fear, what do you feel? What do you notice? And you might explore the following questions. In your life right now, what do you love? What enlivens you? If you were guaranteed success in anything you wanted, what would that be? And can you imagine taking some time on a regular basis to truly and deeply relax? And to explore that beautiful teaching, to sense who you are in the absence of I and mine, and to imagine the more that you rest in that sense of presence, the more your life might be nourished and informed and guided by that sense of infinite possibility. And you might, in these closing moments, imagine your path opening with a greater sense of ease and well-being. Imagine yourself guided from this fearless place inside. And imagine that you could offer the fruit of your practice to the benefit of those in your inner circle. Imagine that radiating out in all directions, 360 degrees. The more you give it away, the more you fill up from the inside. And as you offer it outward, imagine that you could offer it inward as well, to each cell of your body. And when you're ready, you can gently deepen the breath. Let your body move and stretch in any way that feels good. For a few decades, I was very deep into transcendental meditation. Beautiful practice. Very grateful for it. And Maharishi Mahesh Yogi had this one phrase, I've shared this before, and it's so dorky, but I really do keep coming back from it. I keep coming back to it. He said, you water the root and enjoy the fruit. And when you can open to whatever you want to call it, resting in presence, the quantum field of being, the field of infinite possibility, the sense of no I, no mine, the more you rest there, the more you are truly watering the root. And the more you will feel yourself deeply informed, inspired, and living your full life. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Many, many blessings in this year ahead. And I look forward to being with you again.